Well, good morning. In just a minute, we're going to sing the first and last verses of How Beautiful Heaven Must Be. We'll give the sound booth guys a minute to find that. By the way, if you have an opportunity, always thank the guys that work in the booth back there. They get put under a lot of pressure really quickly, and things always change rapidly. And so Will, of course, has been back there for a long time. One second, and is our deacon in charge of that. And then Rob's back there, and Reed, and Matthew, and who else is back there working with you some now, Will? Yeah, Reed and Matthew. So be sure to thank those guys. And if you want to help in the sound room, if you think that would be an area where you would like to help, please see Will. I'm sure he would love to get you plugged in and involved in that. See what I did there? Plugged in, because it's a technology. All right. Announcement type things. I see your hand. Yes, Miss Kathy.
Brenda, my kids' grandma, she's in bad shape. They're going to have to put her in Atlanta. They've got her on feeding tube and everything. Okay. They had to do throat surgery on her, and she's going to have to be in rehab about 6 to 8 months. Her name is Brenda. Oh, my goodness. Okay. Other sick folks that we know about, Matthew Richards. I want to continue to remember that family in prayer. And I don't have any update on his condition. I don't know if anybody else does or not. But also, Mary Hensley has some tests coming up. Bethany, Kylie, and Joanna, Neil have all been sick the last little bit. Lynn Kaiser's daughter-in-law, of course, who we've been praying for. And then Dan and Sherry, and more so Sherry right now is having some health problems and not feeling well. So we want to remember them in prayer. Anybody else that we need to add to that list this morning? Okay. As far as general announcements, I know there is a His Group meeting today, and that is His Group number 2. So His Group 2 will meet today following, wow, I got to make that bigger so I can see it, following the morning service, and they're going to meet to talk about taking up drinks, sign cards, talk about summer activities. So if you're in His Group 2, that'll be today following the morning service. Are the men's and ladies' classes going to continue throughout the whole summer for both groups? Okay, I thought they usually did. So that'll be Tuesday, of course, for the ladies here at 9:30 and the men at White Columns at 9. Also on Tuesday is our activity for, it's mostly concerning our youth. And so if you are planning to go with us, any details you need to know, you can get with me today. Backwoods Christian Camp starts next week, so if you have an interest in going, kids, grandkids that might like to go, and try to get signed up. And if you're going to Camp Watoga, today is the deadline for early registration. So if you want to save $25, that is today. Next week is going to be a busy, busy week as far as getting the summer started. James Barr will be preaching next Sunday morning. We're excited to hear James. And then next Sunday night, Hugh Glaze from Tryon, Georgia will be here. I think it's the first time that Hugh has spoken here. He has been the preacher at Tryon for close to 40 years, I believe. I'm not sure exactly how long he's been there, but it's been a long, long time. I know it started with 1980 something, so he's been there quite a while, and is a really good guy. I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. So that's next Sunday night, and that is, of course, the start of our summer series. Summer series is in the bulletin. So just pay attention to that. And some really, really good speakers, as I mentioned. Josh Cantrell, Andrew Kingsley, Elliot Glasgow, Mike Underwood, Harold Savage, Jordan Alker, Andrew Whitson, Jake Sutton, Matt Amos, and John Podine. So really, really good lineup. So we're looking forward to those guys being here. Also, Vacation Bible School is just around the corner. I'm looking forward to VBS, of course. There is on the flyer that's posted online, there's a QR code. And starting next week, that will be in the bulletin. So to register for VBS, all you'll have to do is open your bulletin, open the camera app on your phone, hover over it, and you can go right there and register. And if what I said just sounded like Greek to you, then you can ask your children or grandchildren how to do it. It's funny how the world works. I stayed in a hotel Thursday night. I did a wedding in Nashville. I'll talk more about that in a minute. But the online, I was reading about the reviews of it, and one thing that people complained about was the parking. You either had to valet, which I don't like to do. I don't want other people driving my car.
Or there's a parking garage across the street, and there were all these complaints about how difficult it was. And it was the easiest thing I've ever done. I pulled in, there was a parking space right there. You get your ticket, you hover over a QR code, my phone, you can pay with Apple Pay. It's 2 clicks on the side of your phone, and then you leave straight out of it. It was the easiest thing ever. And so I kind of figured out that the people that were complaining about it were probably those that were a little technologically challenged on how to get out of there. But you know, the world we live in is a different place, right? It's constantly evolving. Anything else we need to mention before we get started? All right, let's have a word of prayer together. Lord, we thank you for this day. We're thankful for our time together this morning to study from your word, specifically to talk about the things that we learn from Song of Solomon, particularly how godly people are supposed to deal with love. And we're just thankful for the chance we have to talk about that. Lord, we pray that you'll be with all those that were mentioned as sick up and down our list. We add to our list this morning Miss Brenda, a friend of Kathy's, who's really struggling right now. We think about Matthew Richards, and we think about Lynn Kaiser's daughter-in-law, and Dan and Sherry, and Mary Hensley with tests that are coming up, and Lord, just all those who are struggling right now. We continue to pray for the Neal family and all those who are under the weather at this time. We just pray that you'll bless them, give them their level of health and strength that they would like to have, and as we enter this time of summer, that everybody can start to feel better again. Lord, be with us in all the activities that we have planned coming up, that we can all be blessed by those, that we can all participate, that we can all be involved. Thank you, Lord, for our church. Thank you for our leaders. Thank you for all the blessings that we have. And Lord, may we continue to bring you glory by the things that we do. And it's through Jesus we pray. Amen. All right, we're going to sing this song together, then we'll get started. We read of a place that's called heaven. It's made for the pure and the free. These truths in God's word he has given. How beautiful heaven must be. How beautiful heaven must be. Sweet home of the happy and free. Fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be. Your waters of life there are flowing, and all who drink may be free. Rare jewels of splendor are glowing. How beautiful heaven must be. How beautiful heaven must be. Sweet home of the happy and free. Fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be. Righty, so we're kind of continuing through Song of Solomon, and I want to make a big jump into chapter 7. Chapter 7. We've called this Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, whichever one you're comfortable with. And just very quickly in the way of review, what were the two possible interpretations of Song of Songs, what it's about and what it means? Anybody remember from our discussions the last couple weeks?
God and His church.
Okay, so it is probably allegorical in nature, meaning that it has another meaning. And so we would say something like it is representative of the relationship between God and, in the Old Testament, God and ancient Israel. And that their sometimes lack of faithfulness and how they would sometimes be restored, and that love relationship that God had with them and how he continued to shower them with love. The New Testament equivalent of that, of course, would be Christ and his church. That the church is the bride of Christ. So we read that in Revelation chapter 21 as well, that when John saw the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven like a bride adorned for her husband, right? We read that illustration several times in the New Testament. And so I think that is a valid interpretation of that. Certainly there are some problems with that. There'd be things that we struggle to understand. But as we mentioned, every piece of the Bible has an original audience, and it is written to us. So we have to have the ability to exegete, to interpret, and to do all those things that make the text come alive for us. And what is the other interpretation of that? The other interpretation, of Song of Songs.
The bride and the bridegroom.
Okay, so it is an Israelite love letter, right? Between a bride and groom, between a man and a woman. And I think that probably it's both. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but certainly when you read this, there is this relationship, right, between a man and a woman. And there's lots of details that we read that make it like a love letter. And, for a lot of reasons, people don't spend a lot of time in Song of Songs. It's uncomfortable, right? It's things we don't usually talk about in church. There's some of the things that are written in here that our kids would call cringy, if you use that word, right? And so we don't talk about them. But certainly there's a lot to be learned there. I mentioned in the first part of this study, if I was to dig out some of your old love letters and read them, there'd probably be some things in there that would be cringy as well, right? So just kind of be thinking about those things as we continue through this study. So I told you I had this, and Miss Clea gave this to me. And this deals with things like the art of attraction, which we talked about last week. It talks about dating and courtship and weddings and honeymoons. And if I was doing this class with teenagers, we would probably go through and discuss those things. But as I look around this room, any of you planning to get married anytime soon? Right? Most of you are married, and if you are not married, you're probably never going to make that mistake again, right? I'm joking, of course. But it's not something that you're looking to do. Anybody planning a honeymoon anytime soon? Okay, I didn't think so. Anybody in a courting relationship? Okay, there we go, one person. But by the way, is that a term people even still use, courting? No, we call it what now? Dating, right? Or whatever. The kids call it talking. I'm talking to so-and-so. That means you're having a conversation. No, it's way more than that. But I think there is an area where we can talk about things, and it might be uncomfortable, and that is the art of romance for a husband and wife. The art of romance and the art of intimacy and how that works. And here in Song of Solomon, Song of Songs, chapter 7, through chapter 8 and verse 4, this is talking about romance. And I don't want to read all these things for obvious reasons. What I want to do is make Barry Kingsley come in here and read this because he gets so uncomfortable. But we'll read a little bit of it, right? How beautiful your sandaled feet, O princess daughter. Your graceful legs are like jewels, the work of an artist's hands. Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies, right? And on and on and on and on. So, unless some of y'all want to read it out loud, then you're more than welcome to. But first off, you know somebody's in love when they're describing in detail the beautiful appearance of somebody's belly button, right?
Is that love or is that just plain old lust?
Probably some of both. Listen, you have to be attracted to your spouse, right? And there are things about your spouse that other people might not be attracted to, but you are. And so it's one of those things, right? By the way, is the belly button something that, but is it something that's been sexualized throughout history?
Yeah.
Go to a piercing place and you'll have teenage girls in there doing what?
Crop top.
Crop top. Well, crop tops are popular again. They're in vogue, but they'll be getting their belly buttons pierced so that when they wear those crop tops, you can see it, right? And
Cultures to have belly dancers.
yeah, so throughout history, that's been one of those things, right? Certainly legs are something that people have said, oh, they have long legs.
The waist is something, right? Especially for women, they want to have a small waist. It talks about the breast here. It talks about the neck. It talks about the eyes. In chapter 7, verse 4, there's this one I've always struggled with. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon looking toward Damascus. Now, if I walked up to my wife and said, you have a nose the size of the Tower of Lebanon, I don't think that would go well, right? Carla does make fun of the size of my nose sometimes, but this is what the relationship is like. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel. You're beautiful, verse 6, and how beautiful you are, how pleasing, my love, with your delights, your stature, right? All the things that it talks about there. It even says the fragrance of your breath, this is the end of verse 8, is like apples. Your breath smells like apples, and your mouth tastes like the best wine, right? All of these things. And so let me just throw this out there. So how many of you have been married more than 25 years? When's the last time you told your wife that her breath smelled like the fragrance of apples? Last time she ate an apple. How many of you have rolled over in the morning and said, you might want to brush your teeth, honey? No, we don't say that. But at what point in marriage do we lose romance? What do you think?
Have kids.
Okay, why wouldn't you have kids?
You don't have time for your spouse.
You don't have time for romance. And I know Abby sort of said that tongue-in-cheek, but that's a reality, right? That's a reality. The time that normally would have been behind the bedroom door is often interrupted with, Mommy, Daddy, right? That's part of life. And then your children live with you for at least 18 years. And when you've gotten out of the habit of regular romantic interludes after 18 years, sometimes it's tough to rekindle that. Now, does that mean that romance has to die when you have children? No, there are ways that we can work around that. There's babysitters. Certainly people have kept the magic alive having children, but it does become exceedingly more difficult. What else do you think? When you have pets? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. What else do you think?
Priorities.
Okay. Priorities. Petting the dog versus, time with your wife. Okay, life. What do you mean?
Work, house payments, on and on. It's not like dating. You're living in mom and dad's house.
Yeah.
You've got all the pressure then to take care of everything.
Yeah, the stresses and obligations of life.
Which I
Yeah,
don't
certainly.
use that. We told me we were too old for it. We fall asleep for it. But we used to have date night, date night.
Yeah.
Because we would go to a movie and dinner and that kind of thing, where it's just the two of us
Yeah.
communicating. Now we go.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so that's one of the things you have to do. Carl and I were talking the other day. I think we went on maybe 3 or 4 dates last year. Right now, certainly there's quality time spent with family, and listen, I don't think any of us would trade the time with our children for anything in the world because it's very short. But there has to be that time that is specifically for your spouse. I mentioned that I performed a wedding Thursday night. My best friend Josh got married to his lovely bride on Thursday night in a really beautiful place called Cheekwood Estates and Botanical Gardens in Nashville. It's gorgeous, nice, lovely wedding, and we went to eat at this fancy place afterwards. It was very, very nice. I really enjoyed it. But what struck me about it was how different that wedding was from other ones that I've done. So a lot of weddings I've done are 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds. Well, Josh is going to be 40 in December. His wife is 33 or 4. It's a lot different. It's still romantic, but it's much more mature. And one of the things that she said, they wrote their own vows to each other. One of the things that Savannah said was, I promise you that, as we're going to start a family, she basically said, we don't have any time to waste, which I thought was funny. I promise to be a wife to you first, even before I'm a mother. And I think sometimes in life, because we know how important our children are and we love our children so much, we forget that we are a spouse. before we are a parent. Not in priority, but chronologically, right? We were a spouse before we were a parent. Kathy?
I love my grandkids. I got kids and grandkids.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm older.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly we love children and grandchildren. By the way, grandparents are not the same as parents. Have y'all noticed that? I watched Mark Pettit over there playing hide and seek with A to B Wednesday night, and I asked William if he was like that growing up. He said he was a little bit harder on them growing up than he is on those granddaughters, but that's life. And I think what Barry says is right. It's the obligations and the stresses of life we have that sometimes lose that. Well, what other things, you think, cause the romance to fade a little bit?
Energy.
Okay.
We're not as youthful as we were.
Okay, yeah, certainly the energy and youthfulness. Teresa? Yeah, health slows things down, right? Sometimes your date days are to doctor's appointments rather than to the movies, right? I think too, and I hate to say it this way, but I think living situation, right? When you don't live with somebody and you look forward all day to seeing them, and that makes things a little more romantic, a little more spicy, if you will. But when you live in the same house with somebody, right? You roll over and you see them fresh out of the bed, and your first good morning is morning breath that probably doesn't smell like apples, and and then you're living together and going through obligations, and hey, throw that laundry in the dryer, and it's sometimes when just being in such close proximity makes that romance fade. Yes.
I think that the romance probably changes a lot over time, peaks and valleys. When you meet someone and you fall in love, you're very romantic. You'll do anything to catch that person and make that person yours. But as time changes and like you get kids and you get even fights, if you guys are not happy together at that moment, it changes the chance that you have in romance.
Yeah.
And as you get older and the kids move away, I think the romance increases. Yeah. And I think as you get older and much older, then obviously the physical part of it, the energy part of it, takes away from it. So I think it's ever changing.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? Romance is evolving, it's changing. What is romantic to you at 21 might not be the same thing at 65 or whatever it might be. So yeah, but I think that's one of the things that makes the individuality of each relationship so important, right? Your spouse knows what's romantic, to them. So 9 ways here on this list. I thought they were kind of interesting that we could be romantic to our spouse. And it talks about here, specifically it's talking about how in chapter 7 that the husband is romantic towards his wife. It says, number 1, his knowledge grows and deepens. His knowledge grows and deepens, right? So if we get to know our spouse, then we certainly have an opportunity to be romantic, more romantic, right? How many of you husbands here know your wife's favorite candy bar? How many of you know your wife's favorite candy bar? All right, Sammy, what is it? Three Musketeers. I had to call his bluff. All right, Sammy knows, right? Well, how easy would it be for us on the way home to stop at the gas station or the grocery store and grab a candy bar and bring it home to our wife? How often do we do it? How often do we fall short of that, right? But you may know that your wife is diabetic, so bringing home a candy bar is not quite as romantic, right? It's kind of probably the opposite of that. Oh, you're trying to kill me. Okay, thank you, right? So the knowledge that we have of our spouse, right, makes it, man, I wish y'all had been here a few minutes ago, Courtney. I could have embarrassed you a little more, but that's okay. We were talking about dating and courtship. But, so that's one of the things, right, the knowledge that we have of our spouse. When it deepens, we have an opportunity to be more romantic, for better or worse. The second thing there it is our exaltation deepens. What does that mean? Our exaltation deepens. Well, I'll just read you some of the things that he says about her. He calls her, "O Prince's daughter." He also called her dove, perfect one, lily, and rose, and then he calls her royalty. Solomon, right, if we take it that Solomon wrote this book, in Proverbs 31, it says, "Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all," right? So I think it's that not only when we know our spouse better, we can know them better, but then our admiration for them grows as well. And I'll put it this way. When you were dating and you picked up the phone to call your spouse, how long was or your would be later your spouse, how long was the conversation usually? It's long, right? It's long. Now we have FaceTime, right? And we sit and we look and we gaze into their eyes, right? And we look at them and it's just so precious. No, you hang up first. No, you hang up first. When you're married, what are the phone conversations like? Hey, make sure you stop and pick up milk on the way home. See you later, bye. Right? And that's, that changes over time, right? But the more I believe we know somebody, and the more time we spend getting to know them, then the more our appreciation and the way we feel about them deepens. And when that happens, the third thing is our praise deepens. Our praise deepens. The more we get to know our spouse that we're in love with, the way that we talk about them changes. Fourthly, I think then our appreciation or our gratitude deepens. One of the things that happens sometimes in marriage and in relationships is the hard work that the person that we love puts in starts to become an expectation instead of something to be appreciated, right? So your husband gets up every morning at 6 o'clock, takes the kids to school, puts in a full day's work, comes in, trims the hedges, cuts the grass, helps you put the kids to bed, and goes and starts it all over again. And that should be something that is very much appreciated. That's a long day, right, to put in those hours. But instead, what kind of happens is, well, he's a husband, he's a man, he's a dad. Those are all things that he should be responsible. He should be helping me with the kids. He should be taking care of the grass. He should be doing all those things. And so it becomes sort of an expectation instead of something to be appreciated. And the same thing is true the opposite side, right? For the woman that gets up and takes care of things and gets the kids clothes ready and lays out food for dinner and goes and puts in a full day's work and picks up the kids from school and comes home and starts preparing dinner and helps tuck the kids in and starts getting everything ready for the next day. And we see those things, and they should be things that are appreciated. And if we truly knew the work that goes into making every day happen, then we would have that appreciation. But instead, I think sometimes it becomes an obligation, and that's a hard thing, right? And you don't have to answer this. Think about, when is the last time that you told your spouse, hey, man, I really appreciate you cooking dinner. That was a great meal that you provided for our family. I know it took a lot of time to go to the grocery store and decide, what we wanted to do. By the way, nobody tells you that when you're growing up, that the hardest thing about being an adult is deciding what you have to eat every meal until you die, right? But, and thank you for preparing that. I know that took a lot of work and effort, and you probably had to find a recipe. I really appreciate it. We don't say that, right? Sometimes when we get down the line in marriage, we, push our chair out from the table and stick the plate in the sink and just go on about our business. So I think that part of being romantic is appreciating what our spouse does. And when you're in love and in lust, as Sam talked about a minute ago, you say those things, right? You appreciate belly buttons and big noses and all those things that he talked about there in chapter 7. And we need to be showing that appreciation. When that appreciation is shown, I think that there becomes a level of respect. A level of respect. And if there's anybody to be respected, it should be a husband respecting his wife and a wife respecting her husband. That means not saying certain things that even you might think. Did a premarital counseling session on Wednesday night, and was talking to the couple about that. That there are things that even in our anger we just don't say to our spouse, because there should be that level of respect even in the most heated moments. But what usually happens is the opposite of that. What usually happens is we're really, really nice and respectful to everybody else, but inside our home, we will throw those vitriolic darts, right, that just wound and pierce. And whether we say I'm sorry or not, sometimes when things are said, we have no way of taking them back. And even if we forgive, we still remember, right? And so we have to make sure we have that proper level of respect. I think when that happens, also, our devotion deepens. Devotion which leads to commitment. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 18, which I quote all the time. Let us not love in word or tongue, but instead in deed and truth. That our devotion is not just shown with words, but shown with action. And then when all those things happen, then the romantic element, the sexuality, deepens. Unfortunately, we are not interested in a physical, intimate, romantic relationship with someone that we can't stand. That's very contrary to the art of attraction. And so we have to be careful then in marriage that those feelings of resentment and anger and frustration are not part of our lives, but instead those feelings of admiration and appreciation and devotion, that is what we feel. And when those things happen, then that is when the romantic relationship is healthiest. Thoughts on some of that before we move on?
Jeremy,
Yes, ma'am.
I think the level of commitment can drop off as you age, and sometimes the type of work that you're employed by can take you into situations that, maybe if you're the business person, you're traveling, you're with other people, you're with movers and shakers, you're exposed to worldly things that distract you from the spouse at home who maybe is always in that place and not exposed to those things, and your spouse loses the luster that you once had. I feel like possibly Song of Solomon was written when he was, in his first relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It was all that in his first relationship. And he, like anybody else, it loses its luster. Well, that's why he had 700 or however many.
Yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
couldn't get over that.
I think so, yeah, certainly. And we have to be careful to not let those things happen. That's absolutely right. So, let's talk about here, and we may have to finish this another time. It might end up being a sermon later. The art of a conflict. The art of a conflict. I love this quote here. This was the first thing that jumped out to me when I looked at this. It says, when a couple boasts that they have no conflicts, it's usually safe to assume one of three things. One, they are lying. Whether intentional or not, they don't agree on everything. Or two, they have very little intimacy. The closeness of two individuals demands that they deal with their differences, or they are not close. The differences cause conflict. Or three, the conflict may not exist if one is being the doormat for every wish of the other. Okay, I think that's pretty fair. So he says either one, they're lying. They're lying, right? Sometimes you'll say, and this will be maybe shortly after one spouse passes on or something, we were married for 65 years and we never had a single fight. Well, that's a nice thing to remember. But I've especially been around a lot of older couples, and if there's one thing that older couples do, it is fight and bicker. Now, you might get to an age where you don't remember it, after it was over, but it happens, right? Or two, it is possible that if you are very, you have very little relationship with each other, that you don't fight. That might be the case. Or number three, if one person dominates the other one, then there's no room for conflict. Have you ever noticed that people that are really, really close, they fight a lot? With our best friends, right? That's where we sometimes have conflict. Because when you're so intimately intertwined with somebody, it can create tension. Well, the same thing is true at home with our spouse. There are going to be disagreements. And that is not, listen to me, that is not a marker or an indicator of a bad relationship. That is an indication of a normal relationship. Now, when conflict becomes fighting and it becomes out of control, or certainly if it becomes violent, whether physically or emotionally, then that's when it becomes a marker of a bad relationship. But conflict is a very normal part of life, right? And so we have to figure out how to deal with that. And in chapters 5 and 6, there's a little bit of discussion of that. We don't have time to read all that, but what do you think about this? There's a little graphic that's in here. It says, good couples, they fight clean, they lead to resolution, they lead to closeness, they build trust, and they're patient. While bad couples, they fight dirty. One tries to find victory. That leads to alienation, which destroys trust and causes the partner to seek revenge. So there's a clear difference there between healthy fighting and unhealthy, right? Thoughts on some of that? I mean, do y'all agree with that? Does every relationship have conflict? Okay, absolutely. What are some things that couples fight about?
Money.
Okay, well, first off, there's two statistically. One is finances. Every couple, from Bill Gates and his wife to the person living in a hut in the wilderness, they all are going to fight about finances. Because it doesn't matter how much money you have, the needs are the same, it's just on a different level and different scale. And what do you think the other one is? What's that? Well, it's the thing that leads to kids, mostly, right? It's the intimacy, yeah. And certainly, I think that those are the two major things. Now, there are other big things, right? Courtney mentioned children, right? We have to have the same vision for our children, right? The big things, where do we live? What are our jobs going to be? Those are all things that cause conflict. But the main two, statistically, if you go and read people that do marriage counseling and such for a living, it's money and it's sex, right? Those two things that people fight about. But you could go anywhere up and down the spectrum of things that cause conflict. How do we avoid those? How do you avoid those big fights?
Talking them out and having a sacrificial relationship.
Okay. Communication is a big thing. 20% of communication is talking, right? What's the other 80%?
Actions.
Okay, actions, part of it. What else?
Live in different places.
What's that?
Live in different places.
Okay, what else? What do you think is part of communication? Body language. Body language a big deal? You walk in the door and you're excited, there's a smile on your face, your arms are wide open, or you walk in the door, right? Those are different things. How about tone? Your spouse walks in the door and you go, hey honey, I'm so glad to see you. Or your spouse walks in the door, it's, hey, good to see you again. Right? Those are two different things, right? So communication is not just words, right? It's tone, it's body language, it's energy, it's all of those things, right? And so we have to be effective in communication. I would say the number one deterrent to having those big fights is having a bunch of little bitty conflicts. Because if we deal with things as they come up, then we don't have the big blow up at the end. Financially, right? Every time there's a small disagreement, right? You get paid on Friday and Saturday. Your wife disappears in the morning and she comes in with 250 bags from the outlet mall. Well, and you just kind of shake your head. Well, if that happens, every payday for 7 or 8 years, then there's going to end up being a big fight, right? But if you have that conversation right then, hey, honey, I'm glad you had a good time shopping, but, hey, let's sit down and look at our finances and look at the budget and see where the room is and what our expendable income is. Well, she might not like that. I've never met a woman that likes to be corrected, have you? But you need to have that, right? Or the same thing is true with a husband. Hey, it's hunting season. Every Saturday morning from now until the season's over, I'm getting up every morning and going, and I'll see you when I get back. And every couple weekends he brings in an animal and takes it to the processor, which is not cheap, and all those things, and he's just living his best life while you're at home taking care of the kids and balancing the checkbook. Well, after that happens for the first season is the time to have that conversation. Honey, I want you to be able to go out to the woods and hunt and do those things, but hey, what if we do it every other weekend? Or what if we let's take some weekends for the family, right? Those are the times when those conflicts happen. Is he going to like that? No, because he wants to go out and sit in the woods and do all those things that are involved in hunting, and he wants to go buy new guns and, new turkey calls and all those things that you do. But at the end of the day, if the little fight happens first, it will, it'll discourage the big fight.
Yeah, Jeremy, that's what I was implying, not that you physically live in different places.
Oh, no, I think that's probably what you meant, but that's okay.
Well, both. I've tried both.
Yeah.
That you emotionally and thought process, what you value is different. So in essence, you do live in different places
Yeah.
because you have different values and different needs and different wants.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have to avoid those things. We shouldn't be getting divorced over shopping. We shouldn't be getting divorced over hunting and fishing, right? That these things, but it happens because we're not willing to have the small fight, and it ends up being the big fight that is a product of that resentment. All right, I'm sure that we're out of time. So we'll stop there and we'll pick up, and maybe I can talk James into finishing this next Sunday with you. But we'll move on from there, and when we resume, we will move on past the book of Song of Solomon to the book of Isaiah. And so that will probably take a few weeks, but we'll get through there and we'll continue with our study. Really quickly before we dismiss, this class, we're going to stop at the end of the Old Testament. We've been doing this Bible by the book for a while now, and it's great, and I've enjoyed it, and it's a nice refresher and a summary. But we are going to take a break, and then sometime probably in 2026 or so, we'll pick up with the New Testament with the Bible by the book. Thank you for your comments in class.